This is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together. And now, here's Jeff.
33 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. Coming to you live from the South Coast here in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let's go 3,000 miles west. Just along Interstate 90. It ends right there in the 206 in Seattle, where we find our Renaissance man. He is a great journalist, Democracy Watch News. Of course, you can also find him right here on the Jeff Santos Show on Fridays. And he's a great musician on top of all of that, too. If you're in Seattle, you'll find him at a number of great music venues. Mr. Canfield, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing okay, Jeff. I'm actually sitting here drinking a cup of tea from a cup from Boston, but it's one of those, so it made me think of you, but it's one of those things where, like, you know, my mom went to Boston and all I got was this stupid coffee mug, you know, so.
Well, I can tell you can find more than just a coffee cup in Boston, but we'll have to get you over our way. So,
it's been great weather here, but we had some really nasty storms over the last couple of days. In fact, we lost our power for a little while. It was kind of a freak windstorm, and then I was down on the coast and encountered one of the worst storms I've ever seen, where literally the gale force winds were knocking me down. And unfortunately, I saw, you know, some guys in wetsuits down there that decided they wanted to go body surfing. And I kept trying to tell them, like, you can't even probably get to the surf because the wind is so strong and it's so dangerous. But unfortunately, I watched them for a while. They were having a really hard time, and then as we were leaving, I saw the medics show up. So apparently that didn't turn out so well. I was definitely risking it just being there on the shoreline because of the flying debris and all that. It was like a hurricane. Pacific storms up here in the north get pretty nasty sometimes, and that's one of the reasons why not a lot of people live right along the coast, because it's just pretty terrible weather in the winter. In the summer it might be nice, but not so much at this time of year. So that's what's been going on with me. And writing an article at Daily Kos, too, about, you know, the Trump legacy, of course. Although I have to admit, as a journalist, I'm really tired of writing about the guy. I will be so glad when I don't have to spell Trump again for a while. Ugh.
Yeah, believe me, again, we got a lot of work to do. Hopefully he will be convicted in the Senate. We'll find out if Mitch McConnell has any soul in his left at all, and bring 16 other with him, Republican senators, and once and for all prevent this man from ever running again for president, and hopefully get him out of our hairs, and hopefully the Attorney General in New York State and the DA in Manhattan, Mr. Vance, can tie him up in knots in courts, and maybe even indict him and put him in jail where he belongs. I think that that's just the beginning of this. We have a lot of people, including those in Congress, that have to go at this as well. And we have a lot of people in powers, police departments included, and I guess a couple of the Seattle police were actually, and although they've been arrested yet, but they were part of the, that's what you're hearing as well, right?
Yeah, the Seattle Police Department actually announced that 2 of its officers had been identified as participating in Washington, D.C., and so they are being investigated, but somebody outed them, because their faces probably got, photographed or something, and it turns out 2 of them are Seattle police officers, which, and my response to that was, unfortunately, it's a sad state of affairs in Seattle, and a couple other cities, well, a lot of other cities, but I was not surprised. I mean, I've known all along that a lot of the officers, I don't know how many, because, as far as I know, nobody's taken an official poll or anything, but it just seemed to me that there was a lot of support for Trump by law enforcement, and Trump has always tried to appeal to the cops and the whole law and order thing, although it's very ironic. The irony is so thick right now, Jeff. The fact that, you had all these people dissing and supposedly Antifas, trying to destroy the country, and Black Lives Matter activists were terrorists and all this, and then all of a sudden, no, it turns out that it's actually the right-wingers that you got to watch out for, because they're the ones that were trying to, stop the proceedings of Congress. So, and what's on my mind, Jeff, and I don't know what you've heard about this. I know Pelosi was talking about this, earlier today, but I'm really questioning. The question on my mind is what's going to happen to the Republican members of Congress who have been accused of supporting seditious behavior on the part of Trump's supporters. I mean,
I think that's going to be a big
charge.
thing. I mean, with the minority leader and Mr. McCarthy, still voting after the attacks, still voted, to say that the election was stolen, when there's no proof, and of course, Mr. Biden won by several million votes. This is the part of it that you have to wonder, where is the mindset of these people? How brainwashed, how on the take are they from Donald Trump, and really should they be serving in the House of the people? The public, we are as taxpayers are paying their salaries, to what? Destroy the government, destroy democracy. It's a tragedy. So this has to be examined. We obviously, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but there needs to be full investigations here, and anybody who voted for this initiative should be looked at and should be thoroughly investigated about why you were doing something that very well that no vice president has ever taken and can change the votes of the American people. That's what they wanted Pence to do, and that's why they were trying to hang him when he decided that he was not going to do it. These things have to be put into consideration, and that goes for the 12 or 13 senators that became, I think, 3 or 6 after it happened as well. And look, it's one thing to dissent; it's another thing to advocate and egg on violent protesters. Hopefully, things will begin to change. Obviously, this country needs it. And we need obviously. I think our good friend Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you had a chance to catch Stephen Colbert's Late Show last night, but he was on, and I think the fact that Sanders, which has a major control, I shouldn't say control, but a major factor within the progressive community, and I think at the same time is respected by voters on the other side. I always have run into this, and I don't know how much you have either. People who were Trump supporters, particularly in 2016, told me that, if Trump didn't win the nomination, that they would have voted for Bernie. And I think that if Biden is smart, he would put Bernie Sanders front and center. And Sanders is going to have a position in the Senate as a budget committee person. And the fact that he was on Colbert last night tells me that he'll have a position as a spokesperson, for not only the Senate, but for Biden, if Biden is smart. They should let him, without being in the administration, be a kind of a de facto domestic policy czar. And I think that would be wise.
Well, you've been saying, for years, for the last 4 years at least or more, that Biden and other folks in the Democratic Party need to recognize the movement that Bernie Sanders represents, because it is the future of the Democratic Party. And it's no doubt that he brought a lot of young people into the party. Yes, there was some contentiousness going on, but at this point, I think people have decided in the Democratic Party to try to work together, to try to build some bridges and try to get through this really difficult period where we've been under this very divisive regime. And I've been thinking, I have a song called Big Talk, right? And one of the lines is, it just reminds me of what's happening with Trump supporters, is one of the lines is, if you think like that, then you better go back to school. Because if you think like that, then you're going to be somebody's fool. And it means that demagogues like Trump can come along and they can manipulate people, sort of trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator and all their prejudices, can actually manipulate people and brainwash them into supporting things that are completely a detriment to their own self-interest. So that's what we've been seeing. And I did hear some of the segment that you played earlier with Bernie and Stephen Colbert, and I think it's a perfect platform for him, because Bernie is just kind of a regular kind of guy. He's kind of like a Michael Moore kind of guy. He doesn't try to look fancy or pretty. He's just trying to do the right thing. And that's a big change from someone who is a demagogue. And, we've seen that all throughout history. Even in, ancient Greece and Rome, they had their demagogues come along. And a lot of times they were wealthy patrons who came along and then basically put on a lot of big shows and actually literally bribed people to vote for them. The bread and circuses was all part of that show to try to get people to vote for them. So we've seen that over and over again throughout history, and it's happened again. And sometimes it happens in a democracy where they're able to manipulate people. The big difference here is that Bernie Sanders is the kind of person who he would be willing, I think, to make political sacrifices in order to do what's right for the country, whereas the guy who's in the White House right now is the exact opposite. He doesn't really care about people's best interests. He cares about him, and that's it. I trust that Bernie will try to do what's best for the country, and I think it's a hopeful note that Biden, when he was introducing his cabinet, made a special point to reach out to the Bernie-crats and say, hey, he's my guy too, and we're going to be working together. Now, whether we can hold him to that, that's a different story, because, in the past, Biden has definitely been surrounded by the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, and I just hope that they realize that is now passé, that, like you were saying earlier, at least 40% of the Democrats are progressive, and so you've got to, that's a huge proportion of the party. You really got to speak to those people. And these issues, wage and free college education and COVID relief and all this stuff, they're very progressive issues that I think that the Democrats really, really need to pursue strongly. They need to be very committed to them. None of this wishy-washy, we'll give tax breaks to the rich and then someday, we'll help out the poor and the working class. That's over. People are really suffering now. As Pelosi said back in 2008, the party's over. Okay, we can't go on like this. People need relief. We need to rebuild our manufacturing infrastructure. We need to rebuild our economy. We need to revamp and reform our health care system. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm just tired of the last 4 years of this divisiveness, which distracts everyone from getting anything done. And as a journalist, I have to report on things that really are not moving the country forward. I want to be able to report on something like an FDR sort of administration where people are serious about help the folks in the country that need our help right now. The wealthy folks, they're doing great. The Bill Gateses and the Jeff Bezoses, they're just rolling in the money now. I think actually it's probably the owner of Tesla is, I think, now considered the richest man in the world. But but these people are doing fine even during a pandemic, even during an economic downturn. It's the people that are trying to survive and pay their rent and pay their medical bills and pay their electricity bills and just get by and have enough to buy food and get prescriptions. That's very simple daily life stuff for people. And all of this glamour about, getting as rich as you can be and being a multi-billionaire where you'll never even have enough time to spend all that money in your lifetime, it's just out of control. We really need a new set of priorities in this country. And if I were running for office right now, I would be running on a new set of values that has a lot more to do with taking care of the people and a lot less taking care and kissing the butts of the rich and powerful in this country, because that's gone on far too long. People are tired of it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the people on the street, left and right. They've had enough of status quo politics that basically rewards the rich and those who have been in government for 30 or 40 years, and everybody else gets screwed. And they are sick and tired of this. And there needs to be. That's why we're getting a lot of young people involved in running for office. That's why the Bernie movement has happened. That's why the Trump movement happened. People are sick and tired of status quo because people have not delivered. Whether we're talking about Pelosi or we're talking about the Republicans as a whole, McConnell and the rest of that crowd. I mean, they have been, in the case of the Republicans, they've basically, put a stop sign to any progressive legislation. And Pelosi and people before her have been unable to move the agenda forward. So that's where we are, including Clinton and Obama. So we need new directions, and hopefully, it may take a lot longer if Bernie than, was president, as opposed to the current situation. But I think it's all there, man. And, you know, but I will say this. I think we have a great opportunity if the pressure is kept on Biden and on the leadership in the House and the Senate. We can make some big gains, because I think, as you said, the progressive movement is powerful. We may be a minority, but we do have energy here to make these things work. I want to ask you, because to me it's going to be interesting, and I was hearing somebody the other day about musicians and you know, how they really are the salt of the earth, and they really have an understanding of where the country is. We all, you know, can go back to the 1960s and Buffalo Springfield and Marvin Gaye and so many other artists that spoke of the horrors of the late 1960s and the assassinations of King and X and Bobby Kennedy and President Kennedy and others. In my opinion, there is a real need here for artists, which, you know, under that title, is important, and you have been a big part of this in your work. Talk to me about this, because I think it's important what you have done, but in your own way you're doing it, and I hope more people do that. Give me your thoughts on that, Mark.
Well, before I really dedicated myself to journalism, I was actually known around the Northwest as a protest singer, and I would show up at a lot of demonstrations and sing my protest songs. So I wrote a lot of original music, which is politically oriented, and I'm doing more and more of that now. And it just has to do with the fact that I think, as you know, as a journalist, you sort of have to stay topical. And so I started to think that way as a musician as well. And there are some people who, over the years, have been very, I mean, Ann Wilson came out with a song called "The Revolution Is Now," you know, different kind of revolution than the right is calling for, but she made sure that she wanted to be in the middle of that message of change in the country. And so I think having your finger on the pulse, being connected to your own community, and for me, that starts, I've traveled and lived in Europe and all sorts of things, but, you know, this is my city, and so I always am trying to be out in the community, and either as a performer or as an activist or as a journalist. And so I see what's happening, and I feel like I need to, as an artist, reflect that. It's sort of the bardic tradition as well, is that, you know, these traveling poets and musicians who would go around the country and talk to people about what's happening. And there have been a lot of things that are happening that I need to write about. Last week, I sang you part of that song, you know, about holding the line for democracy. I feel like if I can take what's happening, and the refrain sort of in that song is it's time to love your brother and throw away the gun, because you can't build bridges by scaring everyone. That's kind of like the whole message of that song. But it happens when I'm watching video on YouTube or something, or listening to a broadcast like yours, and suddenly I just get this, you know, there's a message that needs to be out there. And if I'm the one to give it, then that's fine. So there's a tradition in my past of being very political with my music, and I think it's becoming more and more so now. The thing that I find, though, is that history changes so quickly these days that, you know, you might write a song one day and then 2 days later there's a whole other issue going on. So it's hard because, so I'm releasing Keeping Up with the Joneses, that single, and there's a delay when you want to release your music in order to get it distributed on all the major platforms and things. It takes a little while. It's a couple-week delay. So you kind of have to time everything ahead of time, and you can't always be completely topical. But there's also a guy here named Dave Ross, who's been a friend of mine for a while. He works at Cairo Television, or Cairo Radio, actually. He's a commentator, newscaster there. And he's always been sort of an amateur musician, and does that thing where, you know, he'll read a headline or read an article or see a news report, and he will immediately just go into his little MIDI studio and come up with a song. And, you know, admittedly, he's not, you know, the greatest talent in the world, but it's very appreciative, you know, he would say that himself, but I appreciate the fact that he was able to be so topical and turn on a dime, you know, write a song. And these days, with the software that's available and the fact that I can produce my music at home, it's possible to do that, to just see something, write a song about it, and within a few days actually have it released. It's really crazy. You have to release it yourself for a while in order to get it out there quickly because, like I said, you're waiting for the distribution companies and stuff to pick up on it. But, you know, I mean, I'm going to keep doing it. It helps me, too. I think it's like a cathartic process for artists. If you're really frustrated about what you see in the world, then singing a song about it and letting your emotions out. And sometimes, you know, artists get angry on stage. And, they really show their emotions.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, though. I mean, as long as it's not violent. I mean, you know, nobody wants what happened in Monterey. Nobody wants what happened, you know, in other places, you know, or to have Morrison go off on a tangent in Miami or whatever. But you know, look what Rudy Guthrie was doing years ago.
Yeah.
Arlo Guthrie and others in that family, and you know, look what we have accomplished with so many singers and Joan Baez and on and on and on. So there is a history here, and I think you caught on to it. Keep up what you're doing, my friend. I know you got a lot of great journalism in your future as well, but I know this is a passion that you should hopefully you know, make some good money with, and I wish you the best on that, dude.
Well, you know, you know, I've done a lot with journalism. I've been published hundreds of times. You know, I've lost track a long time ago. I've been on hundreds of media programs and things, television, radio, whatever. So I feel like I've kind of taken my journalism out there into the world. And now I really feel like it's time to do that with the music, because there was a time when I was playing in bands in Seattle and we were getting airplay on KEXP and things were going well. But other things came up in my life. I was also involved in academia at one point, you know, and thinking about going into the sciences. So there was all this. I got that residency at the University of Washington as a composer for a year in the music department.
No, I mean, you are the Renaissance man for a reason, my friend. Unfortunately, we're both running out of time here. But I think you should pursue it, dude. And
I will,
you know, we are at a point now where we need voices out there, as we've talked about. You know, whether it's on talk radio or it's in the world of music or Hollywood or the world of sports, what LeBron James and the NFL players and the NBA players have done on the issue of social justice and racial justice, you know, has been huge. And same thing with some of the baseball players, too. So these are all pieces of the puzzle. And, you know, again, you've been able to pull to get together. Hey, thank you, man. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy your weekend and be safe out there.
Yeah, everybody check out my article on Daily Kos. It'll probably be published tomorrow. And check out my YouTube channel. And thanks to all the musicians in the past that have done such great music to inspire me to want to follow in their footsteps. People like John Lennon and even Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan. Oh my gosh! So we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And thanks, Jeff. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Definitely, indeed. And of course, Hendrix is another guy from the 206. You know, folks, important to keep on this. And again, we're going to start next week giving out the White House phone number for you to leave messages. They have a phone message there. So we'll do that, as well as the House and Senate, which, of course, is 202-224-3121. You know, be civil, but be persistent to get what you think is important. And we all know from the progressive perspective what that is. Again, keep on fighting, but be peaceful about it. I want to thank Ron Kreider for producing this broadcast. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. Go Pack Go. Like to see Cleveland give Kansas City a run, and I'm going to go for Brady over Breeze. So that's how I look at it, folks. And maybe Baltimore over Buffalo. Have a great weekend. My name is Jeff Santos. I gotta go.
This is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together. And now, here's Jeff.
It is hour 2 of the Jeff Santos Show, and welcome to it, folks. Coming to you live from the South Coast here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Today we have Mr. Harvey Kaye, the great historian, the great author of many, many books, including The Four Freedoms, FDR, and many others. Of course, the great professor at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay will be with us for the entire hour. As I said earlier, folks, we are going to be playing some sound from Bernie Sanders. And again, just sort of a tease for next week. We're going to try to get David Dayen on for an hour. We haven't quite figured out the time, whether it'll be paired with his colleague at the American Prospect, our good friend Harold Meyerson, but that's the plan. Again, with the idea that I think David represents a lot of us on the progressive side that want to see Sanders, as much as possible, a Sanders progressive agenda that the Prospect has written about for years. But, to be aware of the realities of this, that our good friend Robert Craig has talked about, that 60% of the Democratic Party, as we know it today, is either centrist or corporate, establishment-oriented, and about 40% is progressive. You can play with those numbers one way or the other, but the progressives are obviously not in power. So therefore, we got to be strategic about how we do these things, and that's where we begin the conversation with our good friend Harvey Kaye, who, of course, I will give credit where credit is due, and I think this is going to be a critical component, Harvey, in terms of how we get not only the $1.9 trillion that Mr. Biden talked about in his rescue package yesterday through, but how we move forward. And I think that it has to be done. And I give you credit because you have been pushing for Bernie to remain in the Senate. And at the Budget Committee level, he can be the guy that does the budget reconciliation, that doesn't have to go to use the 10 senators to get to 60. Republicans, of course, are there. And that would block it. And I've been saying that's why we need the two me's, and that's why we need our friends Collins and others to be ambassadors, and we can get Murkowski to basically get us over the top. And then eventually do, which is necessity, in my opinion, over the next several months to end the filibuster as we know it. So we can always have that. There's limitations to budget reconciliation. But I think that's the key. And there are reports that our good friend David Dayen was saying is that, and David Sirota was saying, that, Biden reversing to his DNA in the 1990s, saying that, we're going to, try to make a deal here and a deal there. We're going to go right through the, make a deal with McConnell, whatever. That's insane. But that's how he became a senator for 40 years. I hope, and I think that Bernie is going to be the key here, and his allies, and saying, Joe Biden, yesterday is gone, and don't stop thinking about tomorrow. And I think that is, of course, the Fleetwood Mac song, but I think that's where he needs to go. Your thoughts, my man?
Well, as long as you gave me credit, I can just go home now, right?
Yes, go ahead. Bye.
Okay. I mean, you said a lot. Sorry, you didn't hang up on me, did you?
No. I would never do that to you, sir.
Okay. Okay, well, my original thing was to say that nothing's really happened this week, but of course, 2 weeks in a row, it's jumping. I mean, it's hot. Now, last night, of course, we heard about what he calls the American Rescue Plan, which I can tell you, I'm trying to put into sort of 1930s New Deal terms. And I think somebody asked me, if you gave it from 1 to 10, what would you give the American Rescue Plan speech? And I said, I'd give it a 7. It's very promising. And here's the thing, however. I mean, we really do need to get that. You can hear me, right, Jeff?
Yeah, right ahead. I can hear you clearly.
Through?
And so can my great production director. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the main thing is that we know that we've got to get everything he's asked for in this first, as Bernie says, very strong first installment. And I'm quoting Bernie Sanders, very strong first installment. And please notice the most important word in that is first installment.
Yes. Amen.
Okay? So in FDR's New Deal years, people often talk about 3 R's, but there really were 4 R's. One was relief, and that is what we've seen in this American Rescue Plan. In fact, Bernie himself, in his press release last night, referred to it as a bold emergency relief plan, okay? He used the word relief. That's important. However, and I'll come back to this plan in a moment, what we still have to look for is reconstruction, recovery, or I should say recovery, reconstruction, and the key word for this too is reform. Okay? Notice I didn't say the word revolution. I'm not going to fantasize. I'm saying reconstruction and recovery and reform. Now, you cited the David Sirota piece. And in fact, the David Sirota piece was very disconcerting because in one day we get David Sirota's warning at the same time we get this plan. And let me first indicate my fear, and then I'm going to talk about my hopes. My first fear is that this is the plan that then he thinks empowers him later to say, well, we really now have to control how much we spend. That he's going to become the austerity guy all of a sudden, as he was for many, many years. Okay? Now, if that's the case, then you bet we have got to keep the pressure up. And Bernie, by the way, is now once again in a very... Thank you for acknowledging my reason for being there. Now Bernie is the spokesperson, possibly, for the movement again. Who would have thought a budget chair would be the movement voice? Well, he's already indicated it. This is the first installment. The question is how we go forward to recovery, reconstruction, and reform, all of which, except for reform, will cost a lot of money. Reform doesn't cost money, it costs political capital. Now, the next thing I wanted to say, unless you want to get back to the minimum wage question later.
Well, what I want to do is I want to introduce the hope here because, there's a lot of dismay as we both talked about, off air and concerned through our texting that Harvey and I do throughout the week, about what Sirota wrote and the so forth. But here's Bernie last night, Ron Kreider, on Stephen Colbert's show. And this runs about 5 minutes. We'll cut it off probably after about a minute 30. But let's start off. This is Stephen Colbert talking to his good friend, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think what has upset me the most is not just Donald Trump. Trump is a pathological liar and a demagogue, and I got that. But what upsets me the most is that some 73 million Americans supported him, and that he did better in many depressed areas of the country than he did in 2016. Now, how did that happen? Why do people continue to support somebody who is a liar, who gives their benefits, makes policy to benefit the rich and the powerful at the expense of working people? How does that happen? How do we restore faith in government so that people understand that the United States government is going to be working for them? How do we bring a nation together, which Trump has done his best to divide us with his racism and his xenophobia? So we have an enormous task in front of us in that regard. I think, if you're asking me what's positive about all of this, at the end of the day, you have had governmental officials, secretaries of state in Georgia, Arizona, other Republican states who, against an onslaught of viciousness and threats from Trump's base, have defended the Constitution. And that's no small thing. But getting back to your point about reinvigorating democracy and voting rights, at the very highest level of priorities has got to be the effort to figure out how we can create a vibrant democracy where if you disagree with me, that's fine. You're not my enemy. Where we have free and fair elections, where big money does not buy elections, where we end the kind of racism and xenophobia that we're seeing right now.
When there was some speculation that you would be Secretary of Labor, but when Biden nominated instead Marty Walsh, he did say this about you. He couldn't think of a more passionate and devoted ally to working people in this country than you. Does it ever surprise you that the people who supported the president, those 74 million people, many of whom are working class white people in the United States, that you can't find common cause with them? Because many of the policies that you put forth would be beneficial for every working class person in the United States. Many of them for all people, but certainly speaking up for the people who do not have the power of the corporate money behind them is something that you're known for. What's your message to them?
My message is let us work together on health care. Let's work together to make sure all of our kids, regardless of income, can get a higher education. Let us not allow the demagogues out there to try to divide us up. Whether you're black, you're white, whether you're Latino, you want your kids to have a decent education. You want to drink water that is clean. You understand you need health care, that you can't make it on starvation wages. And what our job has got to be is to bring people together around an agenda that is in fact supported by the vast majority of the American people, and vigorously oppose those people who want to divide us up by the color of our skin or our religion or where we were born.
In 2016, Paul Ryan said Republicans should be scared of Democrats controlling the Senate because Bernie Sanders would be the budget chair. Before we go, what's the one thing that you could say that would scare Paul Ryan the most?
Well, I would say to Paul Ryan is that we are going to start an effort to tax the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations who today are not paying by any stretch of the imagination their fair share of taxes.
Senator Bernie Sanders, everybody.
That,
we'll be right back.
Of course, with Stephen Colbert on his late show last night with Bernie Sanders, and we're having some difficulties with Harvey Kaye's line. Harvey, can you hear me? He cannot. Okay, Ron Kreider, if there's a way to get the issue taken care of and get Harvey Kaye back up with us, that would be wonderful. I want to just sort of review what we just heard, and I think this is an important piece of the puzzle. My feeling here is that if we can pull together the sort of enthusiasm and energy that 78-year-old Bernie Sanders has in that interview, and we can bring that to other members of Congress, and both in the House and in the Senate. If we can do that, then we have a great opportunity, folks, to have the Bernie Sanders kind of agenda, because he is driving and will be driving from his key post as the budget chairman in the Senate. And because the way the Senate is, when you have to, pull things together, that to me is an example that he and he alone can kind of really push. So that's what's at stake. Harvey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know. I just got dropped, and now I'm back.
Okay, great. I don't know how much of the Sanders that you had a chance to listen to, but
I listened before we came on.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I think that is important, and again, we apologize for the technical problems. One of the things that I felt that was really interesting to hear was the Paul Ryan, quote about him as the budget chairman, kind of foreshadowing what's going to hopefully happen.
Oh, yeah.
But again, the budget reconciliation piece that we didn't have the sound for in that bite, but and hopefully we can try to find that. But to me, he's saying this is how we can do it, and we're going to use budget reconciliation, which goes against the plan, the immediate plan of the Biden administration, or to be future tense Biden administration, by going through the current status quo, try to get filibusters or make a deal with McConnell to give him the goodies and reduce the help to the American people. I think that's where the pressure has to go from the progressive movement, is to say, Joe Biden, if you don't listen to Bernie Sanders, you're going to end up being not only a one-term president, but you're going to be a disgrace, because you had the opportunity to do this and you failed, and you reverted back to the Joe Biden that gets 10% of the loaf as opposed to 80% of it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I don't know how much of the interview with Colbert you played, but it's that piece, and then towards the end, and I don't mean to jump ahead if you were going to play that, where Bernie pretty much assured everyone that that big business or capital, the rich, they're going to be taxed. I mean, he was very
we
clear.
We did play that sound, yeah.
You did, good, because that to me that's the part when I heard it, I said, good. Because now, if it's the case, the early part and the later part, it indicates that if Bernie doesn't have Joe Biden's ear, then Joe Biden is definitely failing himself, not merely Bernie, because Bernie understands the imperative of acting for two reasons. First of all, because American working people need it, absolutely need it. It's not, we cannot afford another Carter presidency, another Clinton presidency, another Obama presidency. It's like now is the time, or we might as well just give up now and say, come on and take over the House and Senate, to hell with it. So, but Bernie gets it. And I think in some ways now his age matters probably, because this is the chance, not for himself, but this is the chance that he can make an historic difference. And the trick now is to challenge Biden by supporting Bernie. That's and others in the House say, because the House has a great deal to say about budgetary spending. And I've been saying this for a long time. To go to war with Biden, as some people want to do it, I just don't see that. But basically, if you've got people in Washington, real progressives. I mean, Biden's not a progressive. Real progressives like Bernie, like the Squad, and there are others in there. They must be empowered with our support. And there's no other way to look at it, because seriously speaking, 2022 is not very far away.
No, and yesterday our great economist, Rob Scott of the Economic Policy Institute, said the same thing. It basically is that if you don't move, to use our terms that you and I use a lot, an FDR agenda, if you don't go big and bold, you go home. And I say with the tail between your legs, and that's where the Democrats, where Joe Biden will go if he decides to play, the 1990s game, and that's a failure, and that's maybe the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. Look, we just talked to David Paleologos, the great pollster from Suffolk University in Boston, and the numbers that he's going to announce to us on Tuesday, he's combined, is that the negative feeling in the country right now, on both sides, the mistrust of media, the mistrust of government, as low as Trump's numbers are, Pelosi's are worst. It is to a point where we need good government, and we need people to take the bold steps. The more bold he goes, the more people will say, hey, this guy actually is Bernie light. He actually is doing what we need to do. If he says, if he does the stuff that everybody expects, that's going to come out of just the same old, and people will shut him down. I mean, nobody's going to come out. Look, Joe Biden doesn't have half the set of skills that Obama and Clinton had, and both of them got creamed in '94 and 2010. You trying to tell me Biden's going to talk his way out of? Well, I only could give you a few because we had to watch the deficit and we had to do this and that. He'll get shellacked.
Yeah, and I want to say something which is part of this whole political equation, not necessarily legislative equation. And the political equation is this: we cannot operate on the assumption that however many folks who tried to occupy the Capitol building and ended up killing 6 people. Is it now the number 6? At least 5 people.
2 police officers now are dead, yes.
Yeah, so we cannot assume that those folks are necessarily the best of the Republicans, okay? What we have to assume is that most Republicans, however misguided they may seem, are not those people who stormed the Capitol building. And in fact, if we're going to try to restore a confidence in the United States, a trust in institutions that deserve trust. Look, Fox News does not deserve anybody's trust. I'm not even sure MSNBC deserves anybody's trust.
Or CNN,
But if we're going to restore trust, we're going to have to figure out how to bring the folks who are Republicans and are seriously concerned about their futures and their kids' futures. They're not drowning in the lies of the Trump years. The only way to do that is to engage them in look, Biden calls it Build Back Better. I'd say in the nation-building project that presents itself right now that Bernie is prepared to advance by way of the Budget Committee, and presumably others alongside of him will take up in other kinds of committees. And then, of course, the question is, will the House come through? I mean, we know the House leadership is an embarrassment, but it's also the case that the House will generally go where the president wants to go. That's the way it'll work.
Exactly. No, I think you're exactly right. All right, let's go to the phones here. I want to bring in our good friend Stephen from Lafayette, California. You're next with Harvey Kaye. What say you, Stephen?
Okay, I'm going to make a couple points. Hopefully I can get them out. So let me just jump on before I forget. Mr. Harvey just said about reform. When I first saw the rioters at the Congress, for 10 seconds, there was one crazy person that was correct. He was yelling, saying that we pay taxes, we pay their salaries, and they don't do anything for us. With that said, they are forgotten. And in order to change them, as you said earlier, Jeff, Bernie Sanders spoke to those people. You have to
That's
meet
right.
their needs. They are lost. They are number two. We also have a mental health problem in this society with veterans, police officers, and just crazy people that need help. We should have once a month, mandatory, or every 2 months, mental health checkup and meet with your therapist, because we need to help those people, okay? Number three, John or somebody spoke about media. I'll make it quick. We had Don Lemon yesterday talking how Trump was horrible, blah, blah, blah. It was his station that gave Trump free airtime. Number four, we need to get behind, also on the outside-inside strategy, as you talked about, Jeff, Reverend Barber. When he talks, people listen. We need to get one central message, all these groups behind him. And lastly, closing your eyes, you listen to Bernie. He's talking from the heart.
You're right on. I'm gonna hold you there, Stephen, because we're running out of time in this segment. We're going to hold you to the next segment. Again, folks, we'll be with Harvey Kaye to the top of the hour. You are tuned into the Jeff Santos Show. We'll be right back after this timeout.